Hello everyone, the video today is about andropause. Just before jumping into the video, if you don't mind taking a quick moment to please like, share, subscribe, and or post a quick comment on the video, I'd really appreciate it. So thanks in advance for taking a second to do that. And as per usual, nothing that I'm saying should be construed as medical advice. This is for informational purposes only. And if you need medical advice, please talk to your healthcare provider to get that advice. So I posted a video a couple of weeks ago about treatment options or thoughts around going things that could be done if a woman goes into early menopause, and then someone posted a comment on that video saying, what about andropause? And I thought, what about andropause? Let's have a video about andropause. Andropause is a term that is I don't think as well known as menopause. I think everyone knows about menopause, but for those who are not familiar, andropause, which refers to androgens, or what are stereotypically called kind of like the male sex hormones, so like testosterone and DHT and androstenedione and different hormones like that. It's when those hormones are no longer being produced in plenitude anymore in stereotypically in male patients. And so just as women, go through menopause at a certain point, and it's much more obvious because they're no longer menstruating anymore. And of course there are some again, stereotypical is the word of the video here. Some stereotypical symptoms that are associated with menopause. Andropause is not necessarily as overtly obvious because there's no male version of a menstrual cycle. What's interesting, I think, is that male hormones do seem to follow a certain cyclical pattern as well. To my understanding, there's not a set pattern like these, stereotypical monthly pattern, 28-day plus or minus, a few days cycle for women. But but with men, they seem to some extent follow like around a 3-month cycle, give or take. So if you're a man listening, or you're a woman listening, or anyone listening who knows a man, if it's like, oh yeah, like just sometimes, periodically, like he doesn't seem to have as much get up and go, or there's not as much interest in around sexual function, or there's just seems like, I can't seem to push quite as much weight at the gym, or not seeming to perform quite as well playing sports. Just be interesting to make a little note of that, make a little note on the calendar. It's like, oh, how often does that seem to happen? And sometimes there is like a pattern that emerges and seems to be around a 3-month cycle, give or take. So anyways, just a little point of interest there. But so with andropause, so that 3-month cycle has nothing to do with andropause. That has to do with just a perceived or perceived or real fluctuation in androgens throughout the span of, say, a year, shall we say. But with respect to andropause, that would be a term used to describe when, not that testosterone and other androgens are no longer being produced anymore, but that their levels are quite a lot lower than they were in prior years. Similar within menopause, where yes, the actual menses has stopped, so it is an appropriate term, but the hormones are not completely gone. There's still some trace amounts of estrogen, trace amounts of progesterone, trace amounts of testosterone, DHEA, etc. So with andropause, it would really be more of like andro majorly slowing down, shall we say, as opposed to a full pause. So with andropause, it's a little bit tricky, because some of the symptoms that would be associated with andropause can be related to other things as well. So if the typical symptoms would be, say, a reduction in muscle mass or sports performance, or a reduction in energy, maybe a reduction in mental focus, maybe a reduction in sexual function or libido, which are obviously tied to each other in many respects, those can be caused by other issues as well. It could be if someone's really anxious, or they're really stressed out, they're really depressed, maybe they're nutrient deficient. There's a variety of underlying factors that could potentially cause those exact same symptoms. But at the end of the day, to my understanding, the main way to check to see, well, does it look like andropause is afoot, would be to do some testing to look at sex hormone levels. When it comes to measuring sex hormone levels, in my opinion and my experience, it's typically best to measure a few different parameters. So we don't want to just test the total testosterone. It's a good idea to look at the free testosterone and or the bioavailable testosterone as well as something called the sex hormone binding globulin. So testosterone when it's circulating in the body, a lot of that testosterone is bound to this protein called sex hormone binding globulin, and when it's bound up, it's not available. It's not bioavailable. It's not available to bind to androgen receptors to actually do the work that we want the testosterone to do. And that's fine. It's supposed to be that way. But if there's excessive amounts of sex hormone binding globulin, that can be problematic. And there are various unhealthy lifestyle factors that can drive a higher level of sex hormone binding globulin. Over and above that, we want to make sure that there's a sufficient amount of just total testosterone in the first place. So there might be, the overall amount of testosterone might be too low. So it's good to check, a few, in my opinion, all of those different parameters so we get a full picture of what's going on. It's also a good idea, in my opinion, what I recommend for my patients at least, is to also get their estrogen levels checked as well, because unfortunately there are, xenoestrogens in our environment around us. There are various factors, like I say, there's excessive amounts of adipose tissue in a person's body that can cause an aromatization of testosterone into estrogen, and so that could lead to certain coexisting factors could lead to there being too much estrogen, and estrogen in many ways is antagonistic to testosterone. So we want to make sure we're getting a full picture to see what's going on. But in the event that andropause is afoot, the levels of testosterone are too low, or the levels of bioavailable testosterone are too low, there are some factors that we can look at. One is boosting up more muscle mass is something that's associated with more androgen production. If we do some additional testing to see, like, maybe there's adequate androgens but too much of the testosterone is getting converted into dihydrotestosterone, we might work with certain natural agents like saw palmetto or Pygeum africanans, or Urtica dioica, to try to inhibit that conversion, so we're left with more testosterone and not as much of the dihydrotestosterone. Adequate sleep is also something that, to my understanding, is important for maintaining androgen levels. Healthy diet is something that can be associated with maintaining healthy androgen levels. And then sometimes, there are some cases where for one reason or another, we just, work with all the lifestyle things, or maybe herbal extracts, things like maca or tribulus or epimedium, various herbs, and, we throw everything at the case that we can, and like just the testosterone levels are just still not getting on track. And then in that case, then having a consultation with someone who can discuss bioidentical. Sorry, it's been a long day. Tripping over my words here. Someone who can discuss bioidentical testosterone would be something to potentially consider, because quite frankly, I've had some patients where they're just having a heck of a time, low energy, low mood, libido issues, etc., and they get on some bioidentical testosterone. It's just a game changer for them. So, it really just depends on the case, depends on what's going on. There's lots of great non-pharmaceutical options, but there are those hormone replacement therapy options as well. So thanks to the person who asked the question. If anybody has any further thoughts or questions on this topic, please don't hesitate to post in the comment section below. And otherwise, I will leave it there for now.